All right, Patrick, please take it away.
All right. 37 years ago, I was a passionate Christian. I was called myself a radical pacifist Catholic, as we were known at the times. Fabulous engagement with Christ, and it was wonderful. I was involved with charismatics for a while, raising hands and speaking in tongues and born again, and passionate activism. And then one day the door closed between Christ and just, it was like something went black and it was over. So I didn't understand why, but later on I found myself on the Native American path and then the Buddhist and the Taoist path. And like a lot of us boomers, I've had a very, very rich spiritual life. But the Christian path closed. He was inaugurated on January 20th, as we all know, that Monday. That week, I said to myself, I have to have a community. I'm involved in an international group of folks doing healing work around the world, and so I'm online several times a week with these people, and we're doing all sorts of work. But I didn't have a community here anymore. So I said to myself, what am I going to do? And the thought came, why don't I look for a Christian liberal activist congregation? That thought hadn't showed up for 37 years. And in hindsight, it was like the door opened, the light went on. So I did what every contemporary searcher did. I went to Chat GPT and I said, who are the liberal Christian congregations? And it said, start with the UPC folks, and then try the United Methodist. And so then I did again the most logical thing. I went to Google UPC churches near me, and Mayflower came up. And so I wrote down some churches. I was going to go church shopping. You know, like when you buy a car, you go drive 4 cars and you pick out the one. And this was my first stop because it was the closest. So I came here the last Sunday of the month, January. I came in and sat down, and it was nice. Well, it was great. And so I went home and I thought, next week I'll go to the Plymouth and then I'll go to the United Methodist. But as I said that week, I felt really good. I sat for that, and I thought, it feels really good. And I was totally taken back. I still had my list of other churches to go to. But there was something bugging me about the church, and I thought, what is it? And I remembered about 30 years ago, I came here for some service, something, and I didn't like it. And I walked away with this idea about, oh, there's a bunch of nice white people, but they're not doing anything important. So I walked away with this attitude. So every time I drove past the church, I had this little wince, and every time I heard the Mayflower, I had this little wince. And I thought, I can probably get past that 30-year-old bias. And I thought, I'm coming back. I'm coming back and planting myself here. So the first Sunday of February, I came with a commitment to show up for a period of time and to see what happened. And I came that day, and you all were celebrating changing your name to Creekside. And I just thought, wow, to me, it seemed like you had voted that week and decided to change your name. So when I came over to Creekside, and I thought, what a welcoming group of people changed their name for me. We're so happy to be here. You folks are doing something so wonderful here. And I feel Jesus here. I feel Christ. When I'm up in that room, some might call it the Holy Spirit, some might call it God, but something happens up there. And that something opens up that's bigger than me, bigger than us. So I am really happy to be here. So happy to be part of you all.
Would you mind just taking the microphone and pinning it a little bit closer to your
There. I'm not alone anymore. I even have no opinion on my company. That better?
Yeah.
All right, and Bill. And I'm gonna watch my notes and I'm gonna watch the clock because talking about intergenerational collective trauma is my wheelhouse, as they say. And it is the most exciting work I've done in my career. And I've been a therapist for nearly 50 years. And doing this work is so exciting to me. So I could talk for a long time. And I'm Irish, so I could talk for a really, really long time. So I'm gonna watch my notes and try to breathe and watch the clock. Trauma separates us. When we're in a trauma field of unprocessed material, our nervous systems constrict. And when we do that, something separates. We are in a massive collective trauma at this moment in our country, as most of us know and most of us can feel. And there's so much now we can do to not endure it, but to sort of move with it. And the biggest thing you do in a collective trauma to sort of work with it, a collective trauma needs a collective response. And this is what we do here at Creekside. We come together every Sunday, we come together in our groups, and coming together with other people's nervous systems is how we get more regulated. We know a child who has a trauma, something they lose their favorite toy, they're traumatized, they run to mom or dad or their caregiver. And we pick them up and we soothe them and we say, oh, we hold it, and our nervous system regulates their nervous system. It doesn't change our whole life. Even connecting with another person, connecting with a group of people is one of the most quickest ways to regulate our nervous system. So just a couple comments about our collective trauma, and then I'll say more about the bigger journey. In these days, one of the things you want to do is you want to let yourself know I'm not feeling well when you're not. A lot of us educated, a lot of us privileged, a lot of us folks who believe we're liberals and we're activists, we tell ourselves, I can handle this. Tell ourselves, I should be able to do this. I've been around a long time. I tell myself all the time, I'm a therapist, I'm a trauma therapist, I'm a collective trauma therapist. I've done all this stuff where it shouldn't bother me. And then I wake up and I feel miserable, and then I start to feel anxious, or I get short with my clients. I can watch it when it comes up with my clients. I get impatient. And I can feel, I don't want to be giving you this. Oh, that's my cue that I want something. So I'm having to tell myself again and again, giving up the story I have about myself and being present with what's true about myself. And the other thing I can tell you, this is one of the coolest things we've learned about collective trauma, is what's bothering you is you want to personalize it. Because we're seeing 1,000 things a day, hearing things, images, hearing things from other people. And at the end of the day, there's usually one or two things that are just bugging us out of those 100 things we saw. Or something we saw 3 days ago continues to burn us. You want to know why that is touching your personal human experience. So for me, and I'll say more about this in a minute, I come from a totally chaotic, crazy family system. People were doing crazy stuff, they were laughing about it, they kept moving on. So I start to get very anxious and I feel like I'm in that trauma field again. This is how I grew up. Everybody's going to get away with everything and it's not going to stop. And the minute I understand that it's touching a personal nerve, then I can say to myself, okay, Patrick, I have agency now. I am not at the whim of the grown-ups. I can remember connect with somebody. I can remember to sit down and breathe or meditate. And I can disconnect from my old personal trauma and be with frightening reality of what really is happening. I had a man on Friday walk in, and my clients know that I work with collective trauma. I'm always inviting them to say how is what's going on in the world impacting the issues that you're working with. And this man that I worked with for a long time on Friday said, "I don't want to tell you, it's so heavy what's bugging me." And I said, "Tell me." He said, "Well, I'm really worried about the supply chain." I said, "Tell me more." And he said, "Well, everything I get," he's retired. He and his wife live in a retirement community with over 65-year-old people. They've got a nice little condo, but he said, "Everything I order, everything I get comes from someplace. A lot of it connected to places outside the US. That's not works. I said, "Well, tell me what it works you about." And I asked him more questions. And he finally got down to, I'm really worried about it's gonna affect my well-being, my wife and our well-being. I'm not gonna be able to take care of us. And I said, "Well, can you think about where that might come from in your history?" And so we asked more questions. He said, "God, my mom and dad were always on the edge. They were always on the edge of having enough, of getting what they needed for us kids." And he said, "I'm feeling like that right now." And I said, "That's the intergenerational trauma of survival that comes from generations. That's in you, in your nice condo, in your world today, but it's affecting you." And he said, "Oh, I just feel so relieved knowing that it's not just mine and that I come by it honestly." So to know what it is that if I had questions saying, why is that one image of whomever, why is that one story really getting to me? If you can find where it goes in you, you can sit with it, then you can right size it. So let yourself know the truth of how much stress you're feeling, how much anger you have, how much sadness, and keep it moving. Trauma constricts and it stops us from processing. And we want to keep processing and not just talking about it. I really be careful. I'm really careful about how much I talk to people about. Did you hear this? How about this? And how about this? And how about this? And the more we talk, the more we get activated, and it's just so. There's a lot you can do right now, and a lot of it should be done with other people. All right. So I'm going to start talking about your generational collective trauma. And what I want to start with is a little meditation. This is how we work with collective trauma or who's surrounded with it, is we do a little meditation and we imagine us all together in a boat. And I'll guide you through what you all know how church works, so this is just a variation of it. So close your eyes if that's comfortable. Couple slow, deep, quiet breath and let yourself sink into your body. Sit and relax into your body. I want you to feel the people around you. I want you to feel fellow Creekside members all around us here. What does it feel like to be part of your community here and everybody here for a shared intention? All of us wanting to navigate this ground together with trauma, intergenerational collective. And all of us needing each other. And so just let your body feel the bodies around you. breath into your body. Do what is best to your heart. Feel the connection with everybody in the room. As we go through the rest of the session this morning, you can just keep coming back, feeling the people around you, feeling the shared intention, and feeling and remembering that we're doing this together. All right, you can open up your eyes. So I can talk about trauma very easily. I can talk about my trauma quite easily. Trauma is language I speak about. So, and I know it's not always as comfortable for other people who are used to it, but they're going to get used to it, and we're getting used to it here at church. Trauma is one of the words that shouldn't be spoken, so we know it's important that we speak it, especially when it's happening to us and they're telling us not with the name on it. So my own journey is I grew up in a very rough world. I grew up with two alcoholic, violent parents, in extended families, well, aunts and uncles. Every family had addiction or abuse in it. There was chaos. It was brutal. It was a very, very difficult upbringing. And I'm here now, so you know where the story goes for me. But for a long time, it was very, very rough. At 18, I barely made it out of high school. Learning disorder. You know, we didn't know how those then. We just had other names to call it. So I barely graduated. I joined the Marine Corps out of high school for no reason other than I was being kicked out of my house. I lost my job. I had nothing promising up the horizon. And a friend of mine just came home from boot camp and said, "It's great." So I he actually told me the girls in California like guys in uniform. That sounds good to me. He was lying. But I joined, and I ended up getting sent to Okinawa as opposed to Vietnam. And I kept volunteering until I got to Vietnam for reasons that never made sense to me until I understood intergenerational trauma. So came home more of a mess than I was when I left. I was involved with alcohol and drugs for several years, sobered myself up. And when I sobered up and cleared up the drugs and alcohol out of my brain, one of the first impressions I had looking back at Vietnam was looking at three groups of people. And the first group I saw were the Vietnamese civilians. And I saw their faces, and I knew, I didn't have the word at the time, but I knew they were devastated by what was going on. The collective trauma to the Vietnamese people was haunted me for many, many years. The second group I was aware of is we Marines that came home, and we were not the same boys that left. We came back with something that was impossible to translate to bring home. And the third group I was aware of were the American public that collectively had their back turned to all of it. So, and then I became an activist. I found Christ, or Christ found me, and I did all this wonderful activism. I found an alternative way to find the back roads through education, and I got an undergraduate and a graduate. I became a psychologist. Nobody I grew up with would believe I joined the Marines, and nobody would have really believed I would ever become a psychologist. So I just kept going. So in 2017, I was heard about a man who was a mystic. His name was Thomas Hubel. And he did a 4-year-long meditation. He was in medical school and he walked out and did a 4-year meditation. And he came out and he started leading large group meditations. And he watched how collective traumas came up. If you do embodied meditation, when the Germans got together, the collective trauma of World War II and the Holocaust came up. The Jews got together, the Holocaust. Austrians, World War II, all the collective trauma. So he went on to get a PhD in psychology to understand the neurobiology of trauma. And he did a training in 2017. It was a year-long training. It started and ended in Israel, a week-long training. And when I walked into it, and he called it intergenerational collective trauma. I wasn't interested in intergenerational. I couldn't understand why he wanted to talk about that. I wanted to work on collective trauma, and at the time I was involved in a Unitarian church. Didn't find Jesus there, but I found a lot of good activists in that great church. And we were working on the issue of slavery, and racism, and Black folks, and I went there to learn about how to work with that. It never come close to being the issue that I wanted it to be. What came up for me sitting with people is war. This worldwide audience has so much war trauma. Everybody in the world has war trauma. And intergenerational trauma, what I came to learn is you cannot separate collective trauma from intergenerational trauma. We have ancestors that have walked across time. We have inherited some of the intergenerational trauma from them, and war is always part of it somewhere. Survival was part of it. So it was an incredible process. And then one day he said, we need to get in touch with our ancestors. We need to have a connection to them because the life force energy that comes down to all our ancestors comes directly from them. And he said, especially you Americans are so disconnected, not just from the land. You guys are not on the land that you know, but you all walked away from your ancestors. So you need to turn to your ancestors, and it was like, I really respect the man and really listened to him. But when he said that, I rolled my eyes and said, he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand people like me who come from a family like mine. I have no interest in getting in touch with the intergeneration. And so I refused to do it until one day I realized that I had a hard heart. When I turned toward my parents, I had a hard heart. And it was well earned. I mean, nobody would say I shouldn't have one. They would all say, I understand it. But as a more mature man now, and as a therapist, I knew a hard heart. You can't laser focus a hard heart. You can't have a hard heart towards your parents and then be open and loving to the world. That hard heart goes with you every place. So I began to go into my meditation space. And my meditation space isn't a safe space, it's a holy space. It is a place that I've been sitting for 35 years and calling different gods in, whoever was showing up in my life. In my international group, we call on each other a lot when we do trauma work, so we're together. So my space has been inhabited by love and prayer and meditation for 35 years. So I just thought, I don't want to live with this hard heart. So I called my families in, and I didn't know how to do it. And there's a handout that we'll have for you here at the end. So I found my way, I listened. I know how to listen. One of the things meditation has taught me is to listen. So I had both of my parents' families. I had my mother and her siblings, my father and his siblings, and I just sat with them for weeks. And it was like, okay, I don't know what to do here. And then I could see how dramatically different they were in the culture of my English mother and her English family, and my Irish father, his Irish family. And I began to feel distinctions between the two. And then I knew what my mother was the one who really, I had really good reason to have a hard heart. And I knew she was the one I needed to work with. And so I slowly let my father's family go. And then I had my mother and her siblings, and then I let them go. And then I was studying with her, and again, and I want to encourage you as you're looking at your ancestors to spend time and to feel into it. Who do I want to be with? Who don't I want to be with? If you want to get to know somebody, you have to spend time with them. If we want to get to know our ancestors, we have to spend time with them, a lot of time. So I spent weeks in this process, and then just my mother and I, and she was in my holy space. I knew I could send her away at any moment. She sat there just tough, like she always was, and cared less. I could just feel that's her. And one day I had the most radical thought. Starting my meditation, going in, calling on the gods I was calling on. The thought came to me as, whatever happened to you? No therapist, I had done years and years and years of therapy, and nobody had ever said, what happened to your mother that would allow her to do to you kids what she did? Nobody had ever asked that. They just kept going, God, your mother did terrible things to all of you. And I had a thought of her being born. And I thought how innocent, she was innocent, and she was a toddler and a little girl. And it was dumbfounding to imagine my mother an innocent child. So as I sat with her over days and days and days, I realized, oh my God, Mom, you were innocent before you were guilty. You were innocent before you were guilty. I had never thought that. I had never imagined her innocent. And I tell every client now when we start walking into their family trauma, remember they were innocent before they were guilty, and they were traumatized before they traumatized you. We didn't learn that in graduate school, right? So it's slowly coming in. So I just wept. I just wept when I realized she was innocent and something dramatically happened to her in her life to make her do what she did. So as I continued further and further, weeks and months into it, I began to, and what happened to her and where does she come from? She hardly ever talked about the English background. And she came from money. Her father came from money. They came over in the early or the late 1700s, I think. They had money, and her father lost it all in the stock market crash. And something happened then because she and all of her siblings were brutal in a heartbeat. And when you know that happens, you know the trauma is not far away. When somebody reacts violently and the whole system acted, so you know something happened something happened in their family. And then the English background, and so England, as we know, colonized half the world. And I've got English friends, and they've been working on what it's like to grow up as an English person. And they were born into a culture that knew itself. They were certain they were superior than just about everybody. So what happens when you're a child and you're born into a family and a culture that looks at other people as not human and justifies every action? It's like, you pick that up. You pick that up. The places that are numb in the culture end up numbing you. And so all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh my God, because my mother was one tough woman and she was certain she was superior to everybody. Now I'm going, no, it's not just a tough, drunk old woman. She sobered up, they all sobered up by the way. Nobody apologized for anything, neither of my parents, my older brother, nobody ever. So everybody just said, yeah, whatever. But I'm looking at my mother now through what happened to her and through becoming from her English background. And I'm going, oh my God. She comes by it honestly. And then you throw in the trauma, whatever happened to her family, you throw in the alcoholism. And all of a sudden I'm having much more compassion for her. And then I'm sitting with my English ancestors. And they're looking at me and I'm wondering, how could you do that? How could you all be so brutal? How could you? And I listened to them. One day they said to me, we're not bad people. Oh, they're not. The English, they did all that. They're not collectively bad people. They all learned it. It all got passed down. They did bad things, but they didn't think it was. So I just started having compassion for these people I wanted nothing to do with. It was stunning to me. So let's take a breath. I can see in your faces, dots are connected, your understanding this comes in your family too. What you do, presence of God. Other eyes again. And then there's my father. Their violence from my parents was so different. As a kid, it was all violence. It didn't feel different to me. It was like where it was coming from. It was, but as I got older, and especially as I started asking questions, what happened to my son? My mother was, former wife called her battle axe, a walking battle axe. Nobody gave my mother crap ever. She was one tough woman, and you knew. My father, on the other hand, was this class guy who he was also alcoholic and violent. But his was so different. And I began to sit with him, and he was actually easy once I understood it. He grew up, both of my grandfathers were 20 years older than my grandmothers. And back in the day, in different cultures, certainly the Irish culture, if a woman became a spinster, if she wasn't married by 25, it was over. She was done. So what the community did then is look for an eligible bachelor who had passed his prime. And then the community hooked them up to do what they were supposed to do, especially good Catholics have children. So that happened on both sides of my family. What I can tell, there was no love in marriages. There was no fathering in either side. So my father grew up in the 20s and 30s. His father was gone and drinking and gambling and womanizing. His mom had 7 children, pretty much on her own. He was passed around as an infant. He was 6 or 7. His mother was taking care of his family in the middle of the Depression. They would pass my father around on a pillow between the kids. And it just occurred to me the other day, that's the story, the older girls would pass him around. But the older girls were like 4, 5, and 7. That was my father's nurturing. When my father was 14, he got sent to a seminary. And he was the model of a vulnerable child. He went to a seminary, the most notorious seminary in the US. It's in Boston for abusing young boys. And my father came back from that broken. He never said a word, but he was bitter. And my father was weak by constitution. He was sort of broken. And he got kicked out of the seminary, sent home because he was unfit. 2 years later, he joined the army. It was like 1942. He was old enough, him and his buddies. All his buddies went to war, and my father got discharged for being unfit for military service. That was my father's youth. And then I understood, and then I did more research. And growing up with Irish loved to drink, my family, and tell stories and sing. And they had stories about the old country that I didn't believe for a second. Because they told them drinking with a little tear in their eyes and about the old country. And it seemed to me like the stories got more romanticized over the years as the drinking got worse. But I did the research, and a lot of what they said did happen. My great-grandfather got on the boat with his father in 1848 in the third year of potato famine. Got on a boat that was a cargo ship. It had enough beds and toilets for the crew. And they added 50, 100, 200, however many they could get in. And they took those to the US, and 20 to 40% of the people on those ships died. Conditions were horrific beyond imagination. So my great-grandfather was there watching his father and mother get on the boat. His mother died. He had 2 or 3 siblings, 1 or 2 of them died. And he got off the boat. And my father and his family looked like people who came from a colonized country. The English had colonized Ireland for hundreds of years before my father's family left. The English had taken away the language, religion, schooling, their instruments, their culture. The English used Ireland as a laboratory to see what worked, and then they imported that kind of colonizing around the world. I didn't know until 2 or 3 years ago that my father in Ireland was colonized, because it was never talked about. The Irish are just starting to talk about it. It is such a horrific trauma to be colonized, to be dehumanized over a period of time. And that's in my father's family, and that was in the family I grew up in. So I began to understand the kind of violence that therapy never understood. Western therapy serves the American Western culture, and what it does well is it severs connection to the past. The problem is in you. Let's talk about your problems. Let's talk about your symptoms, and let's work on you. And that's the way we like it. Rugged individualism, every man for himself. Psychotherapy contributes to the severing of connection to family and community. And it's a patriarchal deal. It serves the system. When we can't look at the system, it serves the system. The system was put together by white privileged men. And it contributes to it. And to find myself in the middle of it most of my life and doing the same thing that was done to me, I kept turning people inward. Let's talk about what happened to you. And we're understanding now, oh my God, there's so much more going on than just me. So there's my father, there's colonization. I'm a privileged white guy, educated, I'm a therapist, I got a nice house, I have a good family, and it's in me. It's stunning. It was horrible. And an Irish friend of mine and I were talking about why haven't the Irish talked about it? We both agreed to talk about colonization, to talk about dehumanization. Basically what you say to your therapist is, I want to talk with you about, I'm pretty sure I'm subhuman. I'm pretty sure I'm a pathetic human. That's what I learned. That's what I learned from the colonizers. I was subhuman. And so I want to talk about but I'm a failed human. People don't bring that into therapy. It's not something you bring up, because if you are half convinced of it, you're not gonna bring it up. So this is why everybody's willing to talk about my problem is me, rather than what I'm struggling with is generations long. I'm struggling with generations long. So how this works, give me 3 days to tell you how this works. 1958, I'm 7 years old. We're driving up north to spend a week at a cabin like we did every summer. I'm looking out the window on a summer day by Mille Lacs Lake. And back in those days, there was a lot of netting of the walleyes on Mille Lacs Lake, and a lot of the indigenous people out there lived in our paper shacks on the side of the road. And I'm 7 years old, I'm looking out the window and the traffic is slow, and we come past one of those tar paper shacks, and there's a little boy looking right out at me. And I'm looking at him, and we look at each other, and I'm going, wow. It's a question, I don't know what to question. My mother, in her way, said, well, it's just the way it is. That's who they are. And she had that certainty. There's nothing to look at there. There's nothing to think about. Just the way it is. And that's that English sensibility. I just thought, you're tough. And my father just sort of shrugged and said, well, that's how my father was a racist. My mother absolutely was. She believed she and the English better than everybody, other white people too. But my father's racism, when they came over here in 1848, they were known as white Negroes. Because the English was the one that spread the word. The English had been colonizing the Irish forever, and they had been told and learned that Irish are all these terrible things. They came over here and spread the word. Irish are lazy, they're drunks, they're thieves, and so they were white Negroes. But somebody came along with this whole new idea of race. And they said to the Irish, you're a little better than the Negroes because you're white. And I know they took the privilege in a heartbeat. I knew they took the advantage in a heartbeat, and I don't think they ever stopped taking any advantage they could take. And if it meant turning away from who didn't get it, they turned away. They had turned away from so much to survive. So that racism, how I can turn away, is in me. Part of the benefit of finding your ancestors and connecting is it puts it in context. How could I have done what I did? How could I have gone to Vietnam and taken part in that horrific trauma that we did? We did great harm. Great harm in Vietnam. I took part in that. How could I do that? Because I did it with enthusiasm. And there's my English ancestors. Dominant, violent. And I grew up in a family with hatred, and hatred looks for a target. When you're wounded, you're looking for somebody to take it out on. So I have that in me. So to understand how I could do what I do, how I could be the way I am, to understand my ancestors is so helpful. And it takes so much of I'm a good white guy. So they're 58. There it is, showing up the different kinds of turning away from collective suffering, but he did it very differently. Move up to 1981. I'm an activist now. I'm with American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker-based organization. And I'm out at the Pine Ridge Reservation, us Quaker group. We're working with AIM, American Indian Movement, and we're helping them with treaty right violations. We're helping them put together poster boards back in the day. 12 by 24 poster boards that they carried around for Europe as they went fundraising. So we were out there and we were at Wounded Knee Cemetery for ceremony. And these AIM guys at the time were very militant. These were not pacifist folks. We were pacifist and we were doing what we were doing. But the man who was talked about what happened right there at Wounded Knee Cemetery, the massacre. Cavalry and infantry coming into this village and massacring. One of the worst massacres in US history happened right there. And I'm out there as this young 30-year-old activist, and I'm feeling really good about being part of this, and I'm feeling brave, and I'm going, well, this is terrible, and I was frozen. I was frozen, I couldn't feel a thing. I knew I was doing something good, but I couldn't feel a thing. 2019. Down here by Fort Snelling, Jim Bear Jacobs. Some of you know him, he's led sacred site tours of the Dakota people. I called my son, and it was a men's night he was doing through Reuben Town here, had just men going out that night, and I called my son and I thought it would be a good outing for my son and I. So we went out. So Jim Bear started telling us the story about the Dakota people. And we know now 5 miles from here at Fort Snelling, little island down there, is their belief is the site of creation. It's the beginning of the Dakota people. And it's also the site of a concentration camp. We had a concentration camp down there. Elderly women and children spent the winter there. Many died. Horrific. It's 2019. I have never heard that. I imagine myself a champion of treaty rights. I knew what happened at the 1848 Fort Laramie trial and what happened out there on Pine Ridge, and I knew all that, and the 250 treaty violations we knew about at the time. It never occurred to me to ask whose land I was on. This is what collective trauma does. You can stand in the middle of it and you can't think. The thoughts aren't available, the oxygen, the language isn't there. It was so embarrassing, but understanding collective trauma now because of the work I was doing, I understood. Wow. Going back to Mille Lacs Lake, trauma, racism, going back to what happened when I was 30 years old at Pine Ridge. And after I listened to Jim Bear a couple weeks later, I could feel what I couldn't feel standing at Wounded Knee Cemetery. And I wanted to feel like any good white liberal. I wanted to feel outraged. You know, if we're supposed to feel outraged when something bad happens. Well, it's a lot more complicated than that at times. What I felt when I went back there and put it into play is the story of the cavalry and the infantry coming down into the village. I remember what it was like to do that in Vietnam. And I can remember the thrill of it. When you're coming in with such an overwhelming amount of firepower, when you're coming into something and you're pretty sure you're going to walk out of it okay and you can do what you want to do, it's a horrible, beautiful thing. I can remember it and I thought, we're still doing this. We didn't stop. This didn't stop. This didn't stop. We're still doing it. We still did it in Iraq. We still did it in Afghanistan. We're still warring. But I also remembered as I went into these villages in the back of my mind, someplace, I think probably the back of my heart, I was horrified. I knew every minute I was there, even as I was taking part in doing what the people around the world know is an atrocity of what we did in Vietnam. Here we don't know anything. I could feel every time horrified at the beauty and power and insanity of war. And so having more compassion for my family, having more compassion for myself, understanding where this comes from. And sitting with my ancestors, there's this handout that there's so many things to do. Spending time with them, spending a lot of time with them. Asking yourself, who do I want, who am I attracted to, who am I repelled by? What's not spoken about in my mother's family? What is not over here? And it's difficult because it's trauma, and trauma doesn't want to be walked into. You can't choose to walk into our family trauma. It's in us. There's a wall of, we don't go here. So this is where you call on God, call on grace, you call on your friends. So many things you can do. A German friend of mine, I've got a lot of German friends. The soldiers were never welcome home. Obviously, the war ended and it was horrific. So we've got this massive army that never came home. He sat for so long with his two grandfathers. He called his grandfathers in every morning and had tea with them. And he welcomed back. What I do every morning now in my meditation is I say, good morning, I love you. I hope you're well. She's 96 and she's been home now. We haven't spoken in many years. Thank you for life, and I hope you're well today. And I say thank you. Thank you to Arthur and Celia, and John and Andrew, Samuel and Elizabeth. And I say the same thing to my father. My father, he passed many years ago. Thank you for life. I'm sorry what happened to you. I hope you're well. And thank you, Edward and Lila, Richard and Eunice, Daniel and Mary, and even John, the one who came on the call. Thank them for life. I send love to them. I feel so connected to my ancestors. I have walked away from my family. I have walked forward trying to get rid of everything. And now I'm turning around and I have something they need. Nobody has ever looked in that direction with love and compassion. And they have something I need. Family. And welcoming me. They understand and have compassion for me. They know, they know what you did that. I have people who love me, can feel it, and understand me, and I have something they need. And we do this all the time, every day. I am so much more human. It stuns me. It stuns me. Model I have of myself as a white American man, especially a therapist understanding American psychology. I have been living in a box that is too small. Now that I can feel more myself, I feel more connected to people of color. Part of me that knows some about colonization, I actually feel closer to Native people. I always have, and I've not known why. But I feel like I changed shape. I feel like I was constricted, and I feel like I've changed shape into something larger. I think that's available to all of us. Who am I? I am so much more than this rugged individual guy who's made it through a hard time in his life and he's standing there tall and proud. Horrible way to think of oneself. I've come from generations of people, survivors. Man, did they survive some stuff. And they went through some stuff and they did a lot of harm. They did a lot of harm. My mother's family, the English did harm. My father's family did so much harm to each other, they turned on each other. Turned on their families, they turned on their children, they did harm. That's life. That's life walking across generations. All of that different than me, and I'm different than I think they're different. And the indigenous folk who know about ancestors would say, of course they're different. Nobody has ever said, I see you and I see what you did and I love you. And I know better. One of the greatest things about doing ancestral work is you lose your innocence. One of the greatest things is you lose your innocence and you can see you're as deep in it as everybody. So you don't need so many enemies. You don't need other people. I don't sit here with the Trumpsters and go, you're the bad people. I'm part of the good people. Don't believe that for a second. They come by how they are as honestly as we do. There are some bad characters on there. There's some very bad characters. 97% of them are really good people that come to this way different than we do. And as this guy who's been so humbled by getting to know my ancestors and getting to know me, I've got very few stones to throw, and it's so freeing. It is so freeing. So that's a lot. So let's just take a few quick minutes for a couple of questions. Pass up here pretty quick. Is there any questions? This was a moment we need to pivot. Right?
Thank you so much. I identify with more than you know, but the first thing I just want to say is thank you for honoring that it just takes time. You need to spend time together. I am not trained in the shamanic healing world, and I've heard that the most important thing we can do is healing work with your ancestors. But it does take time. You know, my father practically killed me. You know, I lived, I survived, and but to sit with my father, his lineage behind him, mother and her lineage, it takes time, and it's taken me time to like, it's, and just as an aside, my father was also in the Marines, but he fought in Okinawa to take Okinawa. So I grew up with those stories. He would drive me to school and tell me stories. So anyway, thank you. This was super helpful.
Thank you. I needed many, many years to be mad as hell and to be hard-hearted. I needed a lot of time to have my rage and my grief and to feel overall between my family. But I spent too many years there. So there weren't asking the right questions.
Can we spend time with them after they're dead?
Absolutely. Invite them into coffee. Spend time with them. A German friend of mine has a Apple Watch, and he's got 22 pictures of his ancestors that come up at different hours of the day. I have people who take pictures around in their homes. Sit with them and just feel what it's like to be with them. And there's some ideas on the handout about how to work with that, but time, patience, they're waiting for you. One more question?
This is maybe another class topic, but as a parent of young children and girls, how to parent through like my own intergenerational trauma, you know, to let her have freedom.
Yeah. She doesn't get it. Not hers. Yeah. The thing I want to say about intergenerational trauma is you can't decide what comes through you. You can't decide what comes to you. What I carry are some of the stuff that my parents I wouldn't want to carry. Some of the stuff that I don't want any of that. But it is often the case. So what we can do, what I offered my kids is I did a hell of a lot of therapy. I spoke to many gods, I did a lot of healing. I passed on a lot less to them than was passed on to me. I can see it in them, and it's heartbreaking, but when I understand how it works, I do what I can to them, but I'm just trying to be loved that way and that way. All right.
I need to pause for a second because I have to run upstairs. So you all can take a little bit more time.
to get upstairs, but thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we ran out of handouts. If anybody feels comfortable using the copy machine, we can run some copies of it. Otherwise, send me an email. I don't have time to do more right now, but send me an email and I can send you a soft copy version of it.
I can make copies.
Oh, thank you. And then maybe leave them at the welcome desk.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellen.
So we have time for one or two questions right now.
Do you speak at other organizations?
Uh,